Austin, where Richard's at, to put the brakes on what is generically called a bias response team, which is where, and different universities have different names for it. The generic term is bias response team. And so that's a little system that's set up like communist Cuba, where on every street, a house is designated. I'm talking about Cuba right now. A house is designated with a sign in front of it. I've been to Cuba that says this house represents the defense of the Committee of the Revolution or whatever, and the purpose is to report on any neighbors who's doing anything that they think is subversive to the government. And of course, it fears that family, because if they don't simply like you, they claim something, and once the authorities start investigating you, you never know what's going to happen. So these bias response teams, Speech First has been successful in causing some type of change to those that UT Austin, University of Michigan, and so they sued UCF. They sued UCF the month I got fired, so a year and a half ago, for two reasons. One is UCF has a bias response team. They're claiming, Speech First is claiming it chills free speech. If students and professors are afraid to say anything that's going to offend someone, because the person who's offended is going to drop a dime. That's an outdated reference, I know. Call the Office of Diversity and report them. And then the other thing Speech First sued UCF for was, with the new president that came in, he implemented a harassment/discrimination policy. And which, harassment is illegal, discrimination is illegal, but the way it's worded is that anything that offends anyone who belongs to a protected class constitutes having engaged in harassment and discrimination.
Impact over intent.
What's that?
Impact over intent. Yes.
So anyway, Speech First sued UCF over that. And the initial district federal judge thought the policy was sufficiently constrained and said it's fine, but Speech First appealed to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, a 3-panel group of judges who said, oh no. This is very problematic. It's causing people, students, professors, to be afraid to say anything because they're going to be accused of harassment and discrimination and have to deal with that. So 3 days before the UCF attorneys working against me, and 3 days before my union attorney had to turn in their written briefs or closing arguments to the arbitrator, the 11th Circuit Court came out with a ruling saying UCF must stop applying that harassment discrimination policy because it violates people's First Amendment rights. So I think that's going to be in my favor.
Well, in the favor of the students and free speech and on campus.
Curiously, UCF has not announced to anyone that they just lost that lawsuit to Speech First.
Well, that's not curious at all. Again, that is part of this mirage, and I call these incidents. Ours is called BERT, the Black Emergency Response Team, but it also is weaponized throughout DEI because you have committees in every college, led by deans in every college, DEI deans in every college, that their only job is to find racism or find discrimination, and as a measure of removing people from in the institution. I call it ethnocentric viewpoint cleansing. It's not really about your race or gender. They want to find out whether you agree.
Yeah, that's right.
And they'll use your race or gender to do that. And that's the cudgel or the pry that they use to get it out. So it's very much in line. I'm glad that the Circuit Court did that. I think that's going to give all of us and all of the universities some semblance of a tool to go back, and especially with you now as you're going to get what you're owed. Richard, what are you seeing in that vein in terms of the state government and how it's intersecting, for lack of a better term, with the UT Austin and the University of Texas?
Well, so what you see kind of is there's kind of two parallel tracks. There's the government bureaucracy within the university, and then there's the state government. And the way things have historically worked is the state government writes large checks and does nothing else. And the government bureaucracy within the universities, such as your deans and all that, just do whatever they want. And this has been going on for decades. It's a terrible system, unconditional. Forget woke it, forget all of that. Like this idea is like, let's write a check to bureaucrats and let's just assume they'll do the right thing. But let's make sure we select bureaucrats through a process that gets the sort of most self-interested and lazy people possible. And then let's put them in powerful positions and write giant checks to them and pretend that we have no role in oversight. So there's been zero oversight there. And what this has turned into, apart from just lazy people feathering their nests, which has been going on for decades, is you have this bureaucracy that has been relentlessly pushing to lock down speech at universities. So we had our bias response team, and that got slapped down. I mean, I believe it was Edith Jones at the circuit court over here, Fifth, just wrote it's great opinion. It's like, what the hell are you thinking? This is obviously, you can't set up a snitch line. And so, but of course, what do? Is like, okay, well, we're going to do the absolute minimum and we're going to tweak it slightly. And we're going to promise we're not going to punish anybody for anything that gets reported on the snitch line. But of course, we'll record it and blah, blah, blah. And then, once, we need to go back to everyone's, so that they rebuild the snitch line. They put in this diversity, equity, and inclusion policy where inclusion, I think we've alluded to this, it specifically means you cannot offend, your research and your teaching cannot offend marginalized groups, regardless of whether it's true or false. So we have a policy, it's up at the president approved it, everyone's happy about this. It says everybody has to commit to diversity, equity, and inclusion with this particular meaning. And this keeps going. The president's been promoting more and more critical race theorists to the highest, to the tenure committee. And so now 2 of our people on the university level tenure committee, which is only 5 or 6 people, are critical race theorists, one of whom apparently was said explicitly at some point that Republicans should not be allowed on to teach at the university. So we're getting more and more of this lockdown, more formal policies. The business school is getting their diversity, equity, and inclusion deans, and all of these people are very clear that it's not, it's very clearly about making sure that this set of ideas are not represented.